Alright, so we've solved quadratics, okay, by factoring already. A times b equals 0, then a is a 0, b is a 0. Okay? There's this other tool that we have called the quadratic formula that we can use. And just like when we were solving using factoring, there's this rule that we have to set. Our quadratic formula has to be, our quadratic equation has to be set equal to 0. Okay? If it equals something other than 0, we have a problem and we need to do a little solving and make sure it looks like a 0. Okay? But if we have it set equal to 0, then we have this thing called the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula looks like this. Okay? Looks a little intimidating at first, but it's not too bad. Okay? Let's practice doing that right now. Okay? So let's say we've got an equation that looks like this. Okay? And I said use the quadratic formula to solve this quadratic equation. So what I need to do is I need to make sure this thing's set equal to 0 first. And I see that it's not. So I need to make it so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 10 to both sides. Okay? So now I'm going to have x squared minus 7x plus 10 equals 0. Okay? Now I want to identify my a, b, and c values. Okay? Now my a value is always the coefficient in front of the term that has the variable with the square in it. So in other words, right here, here's my term with the square. Now it doesn't matter where that term with the square is. That term with the square I could have put over here. Okay? Or I could have put it here. Okay? But I put it in front. So we always find that term with the square in it and say, okay, well, what's the coefficient in front of that term? Well, I don't see a number there. Well, but there's always a number there. There's always a little magic 1 there. Okay? Because if we have 1, x squared. We just don't write the 1 down because mathematicians are inherently lazy, although don't tell them I said that. Okay? So that means a is a 1. Now we need to determine our b value. Okay? Well, our b value is the coefficient in front of the variable without a square in it. Okay? And it doesn't matter where it lays again. In this case, we put it in the correct order and it's in the middle. So I'm looking at this here. However, I need to make sure that I put my little sign change in there. That's really not a 7. That would be a negative 7 because I'm subtracting 7x. Okay, so my b term is a negative 7. Now my c term is the term that stands alone. It doesn't have any variables, it's just a number. Okay? In this case, it's a 10. So now I'm going to use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula says I can solve for x, or whatever variable I'm looking for here. I take negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 a c. I'm going to divide that whole thing by 2a. So I'm just going to make sure I put the numbers in correctly here. So I put my b value here. Well, my b is a negative 7. So I'm going to make sure to put a negative 7 there. Put a b value here, which is negative 7. Okay? I'm going to put a value here, which is a 1, and a value here, which is a 1, and the c value right there, which is a 10. Okay, so now, solve for x. Well, I've got a negative times a negative, which is positive, so this is a 7. Now this plus or minus here, it's just kind of a cheater way to remind us that we're taking the square root of a number. And whenever we take the square root of a number, there's a plus or minus component to that. Okay? So I take negative 7 squared, which is 49, and I'm subtracting 4 times 1 times 10, which is 40, all over 2. So x is going to be equal to 7 plus or minus square root 9 all over 2. Okay? Well, that plus or minus there means that there's two possibilities. I could be adding this number, or I could be subtracting that number. Well, what's the square root of 9? Plus or minus 3. Okay? So x1 is going to be 7 plus 3 all over 2. So that would be 10 divided by 2, which is 5. So 5 could be the first answer. And then x2 could be 7 minus 3 divided by 2, which x2 would be 4 over 2, which is 2. And I need a bigger board. And that is the quadratic formula.